Welcome, this is Carl Hooker, and this is the second in a series of iPad tutorials for the Keynote application. This is Keynote for intermediate users, and I want to start off by saying if you'd like to follow along with me, I actually have this file available to you at mrhook.it/keynote201. You see that link right there in the notes. So go ahead and download that, and if you want to pause this video and get that started, you can follow along with me. Now, just like we did in the beginner's keynote, what I want you to do is on this one, make sure that you are showing your presenter notes. That's pretty important to do. So I'm going to go over here, click on this little icon there, and slide over the show presenter notes. And there I can see my notes right there. That'll be important because the notes will actually show you a lot of the steps of things you need to do throughout these challenges. Now, I built these slides so that you can do them on your own. So I'll build in breaks as well during this presentation for you to try out some of the challenges as we go through it. So for this next challenge, we're going to be creating icons, breaking them apart and editing them a little bit. And so in the beginner keynote series, you may remember that there's ways to add icons, and we talked about how to change the colors and things like that. So you have these basic icons here. There's a horse, a cloud, a piece of toast. You can go into your plus button up there at the top and of course look around for objects or animals, or you can hit a search bar, which I didn't show you before, but you can actually type in like maybe let's say dog, and I'll go ahead and select that one right there. Now I can of course put this in here, resize it, move it around, go to my paintbrush formats and go to style and change the color to a different color. But there's actually a lot more you can do than just that. And so these are again just solid objects without much you can do with them to change the color. Now look at these icons here. These actually come from the icon menu as well. And what you may notice about these that's a little bit different is they are one solid shape, but they also have multiple parts inside of them. So what I'm going to do now is figure out a way to break these shapes apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this pizza here and actually change the color to make it two different colors. So the way to do that is, so you can see right now if I change the color, it's just solid. It's not really doing anything different, just kind of changing the whole object. So what I'm going to do is tap on the object this time, click on the paintbrush and click on Arrange. You notice down at the very bottom there's a new menu item called Break Apart. And so what I'm going to do is actually break this apart. Now see what happened to that icon. It changed into two pieces. Now it's got the cheese kind of portion and the crust portion. Now I can go and change the color to kind of a red sauce. That's a very saucy slice of pizza. But you can do this to any of these objects. So anytime you see an icon that's made of multiple parts, you can go to Arrange, break it apart, and then change the colors of each of the parts if you want them to, and then they become kind of their own little icons. So before we move on to the next section, why don't you go ahead and try that with some icons, break them apart. Now that we've broken some icons apart, I'm actually going to show you how to create your own icons. And this is a pretty advanced trick. You're going to need to use, be able to select two objects at once. So you have to use a couple different fingers for this. But essentially what I'm going to have you do is try to recreate this iPad here to kind of try this out. Now once you have created this, you can see that this iPad is made out of a few shapes there. It's actually kind of a rounded rectangle with a square and a circle, kind of all put together to make it a single icon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search, I'm actually just going to go back to my basic shapes here, and I'm going to find that rounded rectangle, and just right next to it I'm going to kind of expand this out. It doesn't have to be perfect, I just want it to kind of look similar to, again, that rounded rectangle shape. Now I'm going to take a square, which of course is the window on the inside of this, and I'm going to change it a different color just because if they're both blue it gets kind of hard to see one shape on top of the other. So I'm going to put that one kind of on top as close as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect, again, I'm just kind of trying this out. So at this point, I could group these objects together if I wanted to, which is one way to do it. But because I want this to become an icon, which gives me some extra ability, I'm not going to do that right now. If you look at this thing in the background here, it's actually an icon. And that window is actually transparent. So if I move it up to front, if I go back to my arrange and move this up to front, you'll notice that this window is transparent and I can see kind of through it. So I want to do that with this as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to select both objects, both the square, or the rectangle I should say, and then the rounded rectangle on the outside. So I'm going to hold down with one finger and then click with my other finger while I'm holding down. You notice that both objects are now selected. Now I'm going to click on the format menu and click on arrange. And if you look down at the bottom here, there are now some kind of secret items that have appeared under the combine shapes menu. Those didn't appear there before if you just clicked on it once. So now that we have two items selected, we can now do things like combine shapes, or in this case, I'm going to click this third button, which is subtract, and notice it subtracted the rectangle from the rounded rectangle. So you can see the potential for this, but I'm not done yet. I need to make sure I get that little circle within a circle kind of at the bottom, the home button there. So I'm going to grab a circle, just a regular circle object. Let me change the color of that object to make sure I can see it a little better and kind of get it as close as I can to centered. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'm going to make this actually disappear from the frame as well, so I need to subtract it as well. So I'm going to hold on to it. And this again takes a little bit of negotiation. I'm going to click on the inside, click on the outside, make sure I have both objects selected. Go to my arrange and then again hit subtract. And now I have a circle that's clear. So now I'm going to add another circle to be fit inside of that one. Now it's getting really small, so I may zoom in. There we go, pinch and zoom with my slide a little bit. Get that circle to fit just so. Again, I think to make it a little easier on myself, I'm just going to zoom out here and see if I can find both objects. There we go. Now I can click on that little inside circle, get it lined up back to where I want it, click on the outside, click on the inside with the second finger, both selected, go to my arrange. And this time I'm actually going to click on combine, which is that first one there, because it's going to combine the object into one. Now I've combined them. And I can see it's a single solid object now. I can resize it, do different things with it, move it around. Now, of course, because it's an icon now, I can actually change the color of it too. So I can go to my style again and change it to whatever I wanted it to. I can break it apart. I can continue editing it, kind of doing whatever I want to with that object. Now, before I let you go to try this yourself, I did want to point out one other thing, that these objects actually, once you've created them, you can actually do something called add to shape. So if you look up here, when I click on it, I can hit add to shape. So you don't have to redo this icon every single time. You can actually add it to a shape menu. Now I've made quite a bit of iPad, so I'm not going to add it to my shapes because you'll see in a second how many I have. But if I go to add shapes and go all the way over to my shapes, you can see all these things that I have. Crazy shapes. There's drones and Keynote icons and robot heads, and there's a demented bunny or some sort. I'm not quite sure what's going on there with that pig, but you can see all the little icons, and I've used these before. So if I see an icon that I like, I'll just create it in Keynote and save it to my shapes because I can then use it for later. Pretty powerful use of icons that we could use later, like in this next section on infographics. But first, you try to make your own iPad shape and save it to shapes. Now that we've added some other icons to our library, but you also know that there are lots of other icons in the library, we can actually use this tool, Keynote, to make some powerful infographics. If you look here, you can actually see that these are some actual infographics that I've used in the past. Like the one on the left there is for something I put on our Ian's website. This one on the right is one that we made just kind of a single page sheet for our Coaches Academy. And of course, you can actually change the size, if you remember from the beginner's Keynote, the size of your slides. If I go up here to the little triple dot menu, I can see down at near the bottom where it says Document Setup, I can click on that. Then down below, you can click to slide size and choose different slides. You can see there's regular shaped slides. There's also kind of a horizontal, vertical one. I can also click on the custom slide and just change it to whatever height and width I want. If I want a real long form infographic, you may see those sometimes. So remember, you can do that. This next slide is actually more of a kind of a general slide that I've used before in presentations, again, just to kind of show like the differences in devices. If you look at these icons down here, you can probably think, well, those Apple TV icons don't exist, neither of those projector ones. Guess what? I made them just like we did in the last one, and put them in my shape. So again, powerful use of using my shapes to help in infographics. And so what I want you to do is on this next slide here is you're going to create just your own infographic. And so it doesn't have to be super fancy, but the idea is you're going to go ahead and add some of your own. If you wanted to, you can change the size of the slides. I would probably do that in another Keynote because it will mess up all the slides in this one. So don't do that if you're doing this kind of as a part of a tutorial. But you can also make your own blank slide. And then what I want you to do is just go ahead and add some objects to the slide. So I'm just going to click on, go back to my shapes, and I'm going to click on maybe this drone here and drop it in there. I'll kind of give it a little bit brighter color so I can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it to white. And I'll move it over and grow a little bit over here. Now I'm just going to duplicate it. So I'm going to tap on it and copy, and then tap on it again and paste. Now I've got my second one. I could click on both of those if I hold both of them down with both fingers. Copy and paste. And again, I can add these. If I want to group these, I can continue to go on and on and on and just make more and more of these depending on what I'm going to do. But maybe for this infographic, I'm saying something like, I don't know, the amount of drones per person in the United States. So I'm going to find a person icon, which already exists in Keynote. So I'm going to make that color match my other colors, or make it a tertiary color if I wanted to. And so maybe for this infographic, I'm saying that for every one person, there's 4 drones in the United States. Okay, so it's the math is probably not correct, but you get the idea and the power of this. And I do like using infographics as another way for students to show what they understand. A lot of times we use things like Google Slides, and students do presentations all the time, but there's a lot of math built into this. So the fact that you can actually design infographics to really get across a point or a message. So think about using infographics with your students in the future. And then, of course, when you're done, you can export it as you want as a PDF or as an image. So I'll just take this and export it as an image. And JPEG is fine. There's PNG as well. I don't want to click all the slides, so I'm just going to select this one slide, which is slide number 10. There we go, getting into slide number 10. And then I'll go back to where it says image options there and hit export and go ahead and continue through there. Share it. And of course, you can put this in Keynote, put it wherever you want it to go. I'm just going to save the image. So what I want you to do now is try that yourself. Try to make your own infographic slide with just some objects and repeating objects. And then what I want you to do is try to export it as an image to your camera roll. moving on to challenge 3. This is called powerful quotes. And a lot of times when you see presentations, people like to embed a quote to highlight kind of a supporting fact or just something to highlight a need or an area from a historical figure or famous person. And so a lot of times these will be done in presentations, and you'll just see kind of the typical slide. It's just a blank slide with someone's picture there, like this one here. We have Thomas Edison on the left. You have the quote, and then you have his name, so you can see who it is. But you can also dress these up a little bit. So if you look at this next slide, it's the exact same quote, only we've taken a little more vibrant picture of Mr. Edison there, made it a little bit bigger, added a few little features here. You may notice that the text has kind of has some different colors to it. I've added a little box kind of behind it that blends into it as well, just to kind of make it pop a little bit more. And then there's lots of other versions of this, like this one here. What I've done is I've taken this kind of word fear down below and just kind of made it look like it's mimicking or mirroring the risk word. And so all I did with that is I went into my format, and then actually under style, you can see the opacity there, and I could make it, as dark or light. I kind of wanted it faded in the background to make it look like a reflection. And then I spun the word around to make it upside down. So I just wrote the word fear in the same font and spun it upside down. Now on this one here, I just found an image that was this person kind of leading the sheep over a field, because I wanted it to be about leaders and taking a little bit of a risk. So in this case, I have, again, my quotes, students and teachers and leaders are all highlighted in their own unique colors, just to kind of emphasize the point of this quote. So what I'm going to do is, on this slide here, is I'm going to actually just take it and show you how I kind of do one from scratch. So what I'm going to do is, I love this H.P. Lovecraft quote. So what I'm going to do is go to my camera roll, and I've got an image of Mr. Lovecraft right here that I'm going to select. And I'm going to drop that in there, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than the actual slide itself. I can actually go ahead and move that to the back too, to make sure that everything I put on top of it is going in the right place. I have a little link there for my actual resource, so I can show where I got it from. I'm going to create the slide, make it a little bit bigger so he kind of zooms in a little bit, even though the slide is kind of small in the background there. And I've taken the quote, and I've already typed it up over here on the left in a text box. I'm going to drag that over and look at it. Now, the first thing I notice is that it looks a little bit messy, and I make sure it's in the right spot. Everything looks good. I've added a shadow to it. Even with the shadow of that text, it's kind of hard to see it on that background there. You can kind of see it blends in a little bit because it's a black and white photo. I could make it a different color text if I wanted to, but I'm going to actually do something different. I'm actually going to just find a basic shape. Go back to my basic shapes, find a little box here. I'm going to make a box kind of as another layer in between the quote layer and the photo layer. So I'm going to move it back a little bit, not all the way to the back, but close to the back. And I'm going to change the color of this, go to my style, make it, maybe just make it a gray to kind of blend in with that black and white a little bit. Now it's a little bit too dark, a little too thick. And so I'm going to actually do another trick that I like to do on these, which is use a little opacity. So again, we've shown that before. You can actually click down at the bottom where it says opacity, and I'm just going to zoom it out a little bit of it. And so now I see that it is, well, it's not really great. I'm going to actually make it a little darker because you can still kind of, this words kind of blend in. Maybe go up to like 75. There we go. Try 75%. That looks a little bit better. And so now I've got my quote. I've got Mr. Lovecraft there. I go to full screen. You can see it kind of pops up a little bit. It looks kind of nice. And people can kind of focus on those words that I want them to, with emotion and fear and unknown. So what I want you to do on this challenge is I want you to go ahead and find a quote or something that speaks to you, some quote that you like to use often. Find a photo of that person or an object or something that kind of complements the quote and put it as your background. And then go ahead and put in the text box, maybe highlight some words, maybe add a box to increase the opacity like we have here, and make your own quote. In the beginner Keynote series, we dabbled a little bit on animations in terms of moving things in and out, building in, building out, and action. So what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to combine a few animations to make an object to kind of help us focus on a particular object. So in this case, I've got this object here, this menu bar, but I want the students to focus on one part of it. So if I click play, you can see I kind of zoomed in. That was all done with a series of animations. And so what I want you to do is now, you don't have to use this object in particular. You can use another object, but since I have this one here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this object. So I'm going to tap on, I'm going to turn on my presenter notes here. So again, you can see what to do on this next slide. I'm going to tap on that object. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to come over here and just paste the object itself. And just to make sure I don't have any animations built into it, I'm actually going to tip on my animations menu and go ahead and delete that animation. So we're starting from scratch. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is click on that object again, and I'm just going to copy paste it one more time. So basically what I'm doing is I'm duplicating the object on top of itself. So there's two layers of the exact same object. Now, because I only want to focus on one part of this object, I'm going to actually click on my Arrange button and go over to Image and click on Edit Mask, which we learned in the first challenge. And I'm going to zoom this mask in on maybe the play button. I think that would be a good one to kind of focus on and see how that looks. It's going to be a little bit tricky. There we go. Got it all the way to the play button and hit Done there. Now I'm going to use that object and actually animate it. So I'm going to tap on it to open up my Animate menu. Tapping on the object. Click on Animate. And I'm going to do an action this time because it's already there. So what I want it to do is I want it to kind of move and zoom at the same time. So I'm going to click on Create Path first. So I'm going to create a path for where I want it to go. And I'm just going to kind of drag it over there. I want it to kind of appear to center. There we go. It looks good. Now I'm going to add an action with that Add button there. And this time I'm going to make it scale, which is their word for kind of zoom here in this case. There, it zoomed up a little bit. So I'm just going to click on the handles there and maybe drag it out a little bit. Yeah, I really want it to zoom up pretty big. Nice. Now the last thing I want to do is take this background image, the main image itself, and I'm going to add an action and make it opaque. So opacity is there as an action. And it's just going to kind of fade in the background there just so it kind of highlights a little bit. Looks good. All right. Let's play this and see how it works. So I'm going to click, it moves, click, it zooms, click, it fades. That's great. The only problem is I want this all to kind of happen at the same time. So what I'm going to do again is go to my build order. If you remember where that is, let me get these notes out of the way. I'm going to click on the object, go to Animate. And up here in the upper right, you may remember there's those little lines there. That's your build order. So you can actually click on that and see what kind of animations are taking place. So in this case, I can see that there's a click for motion, a click for scale, and then a click for opacity. But I want them all to happen at the same time. So the easiest way to do this is actually, you see down below there where it says Start Build. I'm going to actually have the third one start with Build 2. And I'm going to have the second one start with Build 1. They've all become one singular build, meaning they all happen at the same time. Let me hit a preview of that to see what it looked like. All right, looks good. Now I want you to try this as well. I want you to take a couple objects, copy, paste them on top of each other, crop them, mask them, try to get them to zoom up, zoom out with a little opacity. So again, combining multiple animations using your build order. So go ahead and try that now. we're going to combine some of the skills we've learned with icons and animations and grouping animations to make what's called a moving timeline. These are powerful tools if you're a history teacher or someone just wanting to kind of go through actions. Here's an example of one that I did at an actual board meeting where I have this object, this MacBook, that's kind of flying along this timeline. Every time I click, something pops up. If I click again, something else pops up. Again, the idea is to watch this thing kind of dance across the screen. You may notice the MacBook itself, it used to have a white background around it, but I used something called Instant Alpha. Those of you that watched the beginner series remember how to do that, removing backgrounds. So again, as I click through the slide each time, kind of making my main points of when things are happening, the users on the other end are watching it kind of happen. So this is a great way for students to kind of recreate timelines as well. And so then we get to the end there. Now I'm going to try to do it myself, and I'm going to kind of show you this as well. Let me go ahead and turn on my presenter notes. There we go, turned on the presenter notes, and I'll actually leave this off so I can make it a little bit bigger just for me, but you guys can use those, of course, if you want to follow along. So first thing I'm going to do is add a shape, and I need to find a fairly solid shape. I don't want one that's too transparent. Maybe I'll use this robot head here, and I'm going to move that kind of over a little bit to get it started and get the color right so it doesn't clash too much with the background. Move that over there, and now I'm going to go ahead and build my timeline first. So you want to build the entire thing before you actually start adding animations. If you try to do it kind of step at a time, it would get a little bit frustrating. So what I like to do is first drop my main line in, whatever I'm doing here. This is the kind of timeline. I don't really like that style, so I'm going to click on style and go to maybe kind of this chalky color. And then I can click on width and expand that a little bit. Ah, that's looking pretty good. Now what I want to do is, since I've already made this line kind of the way I want it to, I'm just going to copy and paste it. And now I have a second line that I can just kind of move. It's already in the style I like. This, again, is just a way to kind of save a little bit of time. And I'm going to drop that line in there. I'm also going to copy and paste it for the next spot on the timeline. Move that down over here. And the next thing I need to do is, of course, add some text boxes to this. So I'm going to go back to my shapes there, add a text box. And I'll type on this, and maybe this is whatever, something that whatever happened first. So something first happened here. And just to save me some time, I'm going to copy paste that text box. Copy paste. And move it down there. This is something happened second. And I'm going to want to make sure that this object, whatever object you have that's going to be moving on the timeline, that is actually moved all the way to the front. So again, click on the object, click on your paintbrush up there, go to arrange, and make sure you've moved it all the way to the front. Otherwise, it'll be hidden kind of behind the line as it moves through its series of animations. In this case, I'm just going to change the color too to make it look a little bit different than the line itself so it doesn't blend in too much there. Now, before we go any further, I'll also want to make sure that I group these objects. So I'm going to group the text box with that line to make it a single object. So I'm going to click on one and then click on the other with my other finger. It takes a little bit of dexterity. There we go. Got them both selected, then hit group. I'll need that later when I'm doing my animations. So now I'm going to click on my robot head, hit animate, and I'm just going to add an action. I want to create a path. I don't want it to be squiggly. I'm going to make it kind of a straight line path where it's just going to move right there. All right, that looks good. And now I'm going to add a second action. Same thing, create a path. Now I'm just going to have it stop right in front of that line. Done, looks good. Now let me click on this object here, the first one, the something first, and I'm going to add an animation to that as well. I want this one to build in, so I'm going to hit add build in, and maybe I'll just make it pop a little bit to see what it looks like when it pops. That looks good. And I'll go to this next object and hit another add build in. I'll just keep it consistent. I'll make it pop as well. There it goes. It popped right after it lands there. Looks good. All right, let's play this and see how it goes. So I click, moves, click, moves, click. Whoa, I'm all out of order here. So again, I've made my build order is out of order a little bit. So what I need to do is pull up that build order menu. So I'm going to click on an object, hit animate, and again, go back up there where the build order is. And you can see what's happened here is the robot's moving, but I need to get this group to happen right after the robot moves there. So I can just drag and drop. And because I want it to happen right after the robot gets there, I'm actually going to click on that second item and make sure that it happens after the build, and click on the fourth item and make sure that it happens after the build, meaning after the robot moves. So now when I play it, click, that happens, click, that happens. Looks like it worked out pretty good. So I want you to go ahead and try that. Try to create your own animation. Doesn't have to be anything too fancy, but try to make your own moving timeline with multiple objects. All right, good luck. We've now reached the final challenge, and this is hyperlinking slides, which is something you can do in PowerPoint or Keynote on a MacBook or even Google Slides. But I want to show you kind of how to do it on Keynote for iPad. Is another great way to have students kind of create something that they can demonstrate their understanding with, whether it be a choose your own adventure or in this case, kind of an interactive quiz. And so what I'm going to do is on this next slide, I've left you some examples here. I've got this question here. It says, which character from Lord of the Rings is the Lego person representing? And I've got some answers kind of down here in the bottom. Frodo, Eye of Sauron, and Gandalf. You can see these are all just text boxes. Pretty basic. I can make them look nicer if I wanted to, but just kind of showing you the basics of this, because again, this is all about hyperlinking, not so much about design. And so what you can do is on these objects, if I click on them now, nothing's happening. I can tap. The idea is the kids would select one of these and it would take them to the right or wrong answer. And so what I need to do is hyperlink these to one of these next couple slides. So on my next slide, I've got this one here when I've got this one here. So I can see which one is right, which one is the wrong answer. And so what I'm going to do is actually select Gandalf, which I know is the right answer. I'm going to hit link. And I'm going to say I want it to link to a particular slide. It's important that you link it to the actual slide number, 27, which is right. Because if you ever move your slides around, it'll stay connected to that slide. If you just say link to the next slide, that changes, of course, all the time. So again, now we're going to go to Eye of Sauron, and we're going to go to link to slide here. And this time I want it to link to slide 26, which is the wrong answer. And that looks good. Click off of that. Do the same thing with Frodo. Frodo is not the right answer, so I'm going to hit link to slide. Back to slide 26, which represents my wrong answer, and click on that. Now I'm going to go to play mode. Now if a student were playing this and clicked on, let's say, Eye of Sauron, let's see what happens. Wrong. All right, so they knew they got the wrong answer. And also you may notice up in the top left corner, I had a little button there that I put in called back to question. Guess what I did with that object? Yes, I hyperlinked it back to slide 25 in this case, which gets them right here. Now they could try the correct answer. Maybe this time let's try Gandalf and see what happens. Yes. All right, got it right. And I can go back to question there. So you can kind of see how this works. What I want you to do is I left some blank slides kind of down below. And you might have to add some of your own slides to this, but essentially what I want you to do is add some objects and then try to hyperlink. You can see there the notes, have them hyperlink to the right slide answers or the wrong slide answers. And go ahead and give that a try. This is your final challenge. That wraps up the Keynote Intermediate section. Congratulations, you made it to the end. Hopefully you learned something through these challenges, how to hyperlink, how to create your own icons, how to make infographics, moving timelines. Again, taking some of those skills from the beginners and applying it to this. I encourage you to use these methods with your students in the future, as they do provide other ways to present information than just the same old slideshow. So I hope you enjoyed that. Good luck and happy keynoting.